Welcome back. Baltimore Positive at WNST.net. We are in State Fair. Life is great in the 21228. Having a little chicken Cobb salad today with mayoral candidate Mary Washington, Don Moeller, of course, riding shotgun. All of it brought to you by all of our great sponsors, including our friends up the street at Jennings. Be up there for a burger sometime soon, as well as back at Fadley's where we have other mayoral candidates. I want to throw this your way because this whole thing was sort of born out about a year and a half ago when Don was running Baltimore County after all of this years of friendship and Ravens games and family events and births and deaths and all sorts of things we've been through. And during the unrest, I looked out the window. My wife was between, I didn't know it at that point, 2 different leukemia battles. She had just survived. And, I walked away from the window where I lived down in Harbor Court watching the fireball in the sky on the east and all the mess on the west side. And the next day I talked about football and baseball and basketball and hockey because it was black, it was white, it was police, it was politics, it was gangs, it was drugs, it was 50 years, 100 years of problems, right?
Yes.
So let all of that go. And then about 2 years ago, I went up to one of our former mayors, and I asked the wrong question. I did not have a good question. My question was, can it be fixed? I said I would run for mayor if I could win and fix it. If I thought it could be fixed, what can it be fixed? And I thought that's a really poor question. Later I came to the grand conclusion, sociology expert, to say, could we make it better? Could we make it better today? Could we make it better tomorrow? Not fixing it, but if it were better every day, for a day, a week, 100 days, 1,000 days, a year.
One day at a time.
4 years in a term, could we make it better? And I know we can make it better. I don't know much, but I think that's an empowering question.
It is.
We could easily make this better.
Yes.
How much better?
And we're coming up with a 5-year anniversary.
Yeah.
We're coming up
How
on
do
the
we make it
anniversary of
better?
that. We make it better by investing in our people. We make it better by improving our transportation system, by making people be able to get to their jobs. We make it better by improving access to behavioral health, right? So there's such a stigma in many of our communities that if you need help, and so you have people that are self-medicating through drugs, or they're engaging in
all of that, right?
So, but if we normalized it, if you had, there was the idea of having, taking the Chicago model and having these 9 investigative districts. Sure, more investigation is great. As that means better policing, better results, absolutely. But what we also should be doing is having on every, a 9 corners throughout the city, just walk-in behavioral health centers. Well, you don't have to make an appointment. You just come in, you feel like you want to talk to somebody, you need some help, and that you just walk in there, and then somebody can just get some help right now. We have too many barriers for people to get the help that they need. Also, from the top, the first thing we can do at the top is have ethical, honest, tough leadership that is leading the day. I mean, if we have city leadership that are breaking the rules, then it's very difficult to come from this high place or this moral high ground to really say, hey, we're going to transform things.
We're not going to talk about the president today, but I just wanted to wedge that in. We're just going to bump over that and keep going.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Nestor, you can't
integrity along all is. Don and I used to get into hardcore matches when I would go on the radio, and I've been on the radio 30 years, and you can imagine as a younger man, I may have aired a few times, but I would just say on the radio, these politicians are crooks, they're criminal, and he would, that would stir him up. No, they're not all Rod Blagojevich.
Yeah.
We have honest people around.
We're not, but what happens is that just like any group, so if you have one woman that does something, all of a sudden then all women, you have an African American that does something, then all this, and unfortunately the same, you have elected officials who violate the public trust, then that is on all of us. So unfortunately that means that we have to do better. So I released 5 years of my tax returns. I've been always open and honest. You're going to ask about who I am. I've always been honest about that. I'm honest about my work. I'm honest when I agree with you and when I disagree with you. And so some folks make the calculation that, well, for a political end, et cetera, maybe I won't be as transparent, or to get something done, I'll kind of play with the rules. But it's a slippery slope. You just have to commit to holding yourself to a higher standard.
Well, you have a track record, unlike some other people. I mean, once you've been involved in service, there's a track record.
I want to talk about that track record. And here's where it gets tough. First of all, I want to correct. It's always great to have staffers in the house who came running up to us at the break and said, it's Mary Washington for Baltimore.com.
Because
So
I want to be the mayor, but I am Mary Washington for Baltimore.com.
So if you're in your car or you're sitting at home and you're listening to Baltimore Positive and you say, I'm kind of inspired by what I'm hearing from this state senator from the 43rd, it is Mary Washington for Baltimore.com. Now here's where the questions start to get a little difficult. You've been an outstanding delegate. You've been an outstanding, by all accounts, state senator. Folks out there that are driving around and they're going, she sounds really good to me. Here's what I hear all the time. Can she run anything?
Yeah.
We've had legislators. What makes me think that another legislator is ready to step in and organize government on day one and make it work?
Because I had a life before I ran for government.
Tell us
you
about
asked
the
me
life.
that. I didn't start out that, okay, I'm volunteering on this campaign and then I get promoted and I, I've had jobs outside of government, and I've had responsibility outside of that. There's two relevant positions. One, I was the housing stat director for 3 years, and from 2002 to 2005. And so Baltimore Housing is one of the largest city agencies. And so my job as the accountability specialist was to track, create performance measures, track those work reports, track overtime, see how all the different departments work together.
What did you find in 2003 in that job, in that capacity?
Well, one of the things that I found was this overtime.
Okay.
I found there was a number of things. I found overtime. I found work orders that had just been in drawers and just kind of sitting there. A lot of this dysfunction that is still here. But we also found that when you set supervisory expectations, when people know that every 2 weeks they're going to be held accountable for certain performance outcomes, that they do better. And then also you can't just do this I gotcha where, we caught you with fraud or we caught you doing this. Because sometimes people just didn't get the right training, so the reports weren't right. So you have to discern what is the lack of training, what is the system, what is somebody who's really trying to get away with something and they should be fired. But you can discern that through a risk assessment, through risk management, and what's the likelihood that a particular employee or particular division is going to be vulnerable for waste, fraud, or abuse. And those are things that we can do. So I have experience with that. Again, part of my sociology is also looking at organizational design and structure. So it's not just from a theoretical perspective.
I
I've
like
actually
that. Waste,
done
fraud,
that.
abuse. Those are the big three.
Yeah,
I like
corruption
that.
in there too.
But
yeah.
That is
fraud,
fraud.
abuse.
I think people are
And so
frustrated,
it's-
Senator. And you talked about
but just
you.
one
Go
other,
ahead,
can I
please.
tell you?
Oh,
so I've had that
absolutely.
experience. So I'm not just a legislator, not just a policy person. I've actually worked in government and helped make it work. And then in the nonprofit sector, I was associate director of Parks and People Foundation. And at any point in time, I was managing programs, workforce development programs with 30 adults, after school green career ladder programs during the summer for 200 young people, and then having to hire 50 people to manage that program, doing contracts and relationships with the federal government and the state government. So I have that personal background. And then on top of that, the 4 years, then as a legislator, 4 years on appropriations, seeing the state budget, see how the state budget affects the aid to local institutions and the access to the aid to Baltimore City and how Baltimore City's budget is. And then Ways and Means had the taxes, had our election law. And so I've just really been in it in a number of ways that no other candidate. There are good candidates, but they all have a very narrow frame of experience, and I have a very broad frame that is really consistent to the challenges that are before the city.
Well, tell us then, because this is a compelling. So one of the things that Nestor's raised a number of times, and Governor O'Malley sort of threw his hands up as well and said, really frustrating. It appears that at some point in time, we had a city stat, a CompStat. You were part of it, for
Yes.
crying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that. You're describing you were part of it. It was firing on all cylinders. We truly were putting dots on a map and making informed decisions. It seems to have all gone by the wayside. Nestor's question repeatedly is, how did that happen? How do we get away from that?
Yeah. Again, different mayors have different priorities, and then I as mayor would reinstate that, because I believe that we have to use data and information to make better decisions. But also, it's about transparency. If you're open and honest about your workings, how much you're spending, what your labor costs are, your budgeting process, then it's less likely that there can be waste, fraud, and abuse, because more eyes are on it, and so you have to be committed to it. We just haven't had anyone that's committed.
Corruption happens when somebody sees the fraud and doesn't report
it.
That corruption's bigger than fraud. Fraud's one person.
Yes.
Corruption. There we go.
Well, that's certainly part right in the front page. They're
like
connected.
you.
There's a little connection going on here for those of you.
Those of you
not
we talk about having
those of you not watching on Facebook.
Of
there's a little love-in going
you know
on.
what I'm saying? We talk about a hatred of incompetence. That's the part as a city resident, you would like to think that 311, that pothole, that someone will care when I pick up the phone.
We got to get the basics right. That is the core part of my campaign, and why I am just genuinely interested in leading with integrity, getting the basics right, so the tax dollars that you are spending, which we spend quite a lot of tax dollars to live in Baltimore, that you are getting the services that you need, and that those services are being equitably distributed, and not just the ability of one neighborhood to be able to be more to be louder than the other. Unfortunately, in a dysfunctional system, the squeaky wheel gets the attention rather than the wheel that's most likely to fall off.
That's so true. I remember years ago. It has to be 30 years ago, but it was under Dutch, actually, when Dutch was county executive. And Dutch, in terms of roofs leaking in the school system, and it's very analogous to what you're speaking about. It often, the community that was the loudest, screamed the loudest, the most vociferous PTA would get their roof fixed first. All right, well, let's just and Dutch finally said, look, we need to do an analysis. We need to prioritize these roofs. Not everybody is going to be happy.
You can't fix
but
roofs on the buddy system.
We ought to show them on a list.
But that's how we're doing it now.
And then we'll work our way down. But let's jump in then, Senator, and let's take some of the really tough issues and have you really address them. I think we all know what they are. What does Mayor Washington do to get the guns off the street? We can't continue to have 350 kids killed every year.
No.
It's about guns. They're on the street.
Yes.
Most of them are illegal. What does Mayor Washington do to get the guns off the street?
Again, we've got to work with trusted partners in the communities that know where these guns are. And again, if we fully implement something like a Safe Streets group violence interruption program, you have those trusted partners who are not perhaps going to immediately report it, but figure out how to get those people in to a place where they can collect those guns and turn them into plowshares.
How confident are you that homicides will go down in your administration?
I'm confident that we're going to address the root causes of violence and murder, and that when you do that and you apply the strategies that are proven and elsewhere, that they will go down. But you can't just have the goal. The goal cannot simply be reducing murder. The goal has to be about creating healthy communities, healthy families, safe communities. And when we do all the things to address murder, if we take a murder and we look at all the circumstances around it. So an example, a proposal that I have is that we reinstate the homicide review program, where every homicide was looked at. There was a team of folks that looked at it, a team of investigators, along with the state's attorney, along with behavioral health epidemiologists, and say, okay, here's the epicenter of this homicide, and then what are all the predictors of that? And then and address everything around it, because if you have a murder here, we know the way it works and the retribution works, that there's going to be a murder there. So that means you get ahead of it and say, what can I do
but
there?
We're not solving these murders, right? We're learning that.
And so, again, solving the murders, building the trust in the communities. We do have legislation in Annapolis now that's looking at witness intimidation. I would support that. We really have people have to be feel protected, and they don't feel that way right now. And so we do need to do more to make sure that those who step up are protected by law and are protected by ourselves.
I was hoping some of our Republican senators would do something about witness intimidation, but that's on another level. We all just smile that away, but we're not smiling that away.
No, we have we do our best to have a no current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
But no. Every
on-
time we bring up something that is just being egregiously
you back to
flaunted
it.
Yeah.
at a federal level, we say,
Yeah.
why can't we have nice things
Right.
here locally?
Yeah, absolutely.
An educator like yourself and an educator like schools
Yes.
and what we're doing for schools.
Well, let's talk Kerwin.
Please.
Where are you on
Yes.
Kerwin?
So year after year, mayor after mayor, and actually governor after governor, we have underinvested in our public system. And we found it 2 years ago that we did about to the tune of $3 billion, not million, but $3 billion. And so as we fell from 1 to 6 over the last 7 years, we know that we have to invest more in public education. And so the Kerwin Commission for the last 2 years is looking not just on funding, but on our policy, like what are we actually doing in the classroom? What are we doing to recruit teachers? What accountability systems do we have that the resource monies are being spent where they need to be spent? And I'm excited that this Kerwin Commission is, I don't want to say once in a lifetime, but it's certainly
Well, David
in your
Hornbeck would
15.
say
He
that.
would say that.
Well, you're down
but
there
we're
in
going to say 100.
Annapolis,
At least every 15 years, at least, in 20 years and 2 decades, that we have an opportunity to fully fund public education, but also address teacher training, the diversity of teachers, implement the community schools model across the board, which I put the legislation in to say the community school model is a way to address concentrated poverty in our schools and to treat the whole community, not just the student and just not the classrooms. And we have an opportunity to that. And as mayor, and I know that it's a big ticket item, but we can't afford not to fulfill our Kerwin obligation. And so that would be a priority of mine as mayor, would be to fund Kerwin and to address where there is waste, look at the systems where there's waste in the system so that then we can investing more. There are lawsuits that the city has to pay out, not just in the police department, but in almost every single division that ends up with millions and millions of dollars that goes uncollected. That's almost like leaving $50 million in the couch, or on the floor, or letting it go out of the window because you didn't fix the cracked your cracked window. There are the city, the way it's functioning right now under the current administration, which is almost everyone that is currently running for office has been a part of this system, is broken, and we need a clean break from that to doing a new way, an accountable way, leading with integrity and getting the basics right. And to your earlier point of how do we show or how do we get other people to believe in us again, come back in, we got to get it right for ourselves. We have to fix it here in Baltimore. And when we fix it in Baltimore for Baltimoreans, then that will set us up for being able to be the model for how do you repair, what is broken for yourself, not because other people are looking. I think that's the wrong place. We have to do it because Baltimoreans deserve the best. They deserve a working government. They deserve a public education system that educates all youth. They deserve to be paid livable wages. They deserve to have their trauma addressed. They deserve to invest in the small, really creative incubators. One of the things we're not doing, we have all these great incubators in Baltimore. They're coming here. They're developing their products. They're figuring out new systems. We don't do anything to keep them here in Baltimore. As mayor, I would keep those, provide incentives to keep those small businesses here. Instead, they go someplace else.
We've seen all the Baltimore and all
so
that.
So Mayor Mary Washington is pro-business.
Yes, absolutely.
She's pro-business,
especially small businesses that are located here and have stuck it out. We do need to recruit new business, but we actually don't do enough to protect our own family, the folks that have been here. And we lose a lot of them, and so they've demonstrated a commitment to us even in the worst of times. I will develop a set of incentives that's about how long have you been here and that you've stuck it out and that you're contributing productively to Baltimore City. I want to recruit you and keep you here. That's the same thing with property taxes. We need to incentivize and reward people that have stuck it out. In addition to recruiting new people.
I pay my taxes 17 years running.
Absolutely, and we need to figure that out. We have a crisis coming up soon, is that there are these 10-year historic tax credits that are getting ready to expire, and people are going to go from paying, $8,000, so probably around $7,000 in taxes or $3,000 in taxes to paying twice that. And so that's on the horizon. So we need to think about how we're going to address that. But funding education, making sure people getting the basics right, making sure that our communities are safe and that people who break the law are held accountable, but at the same time providing the systems in place that people need to live healthy, equitable lives with great food, great parks, great sports teams,
Great arts.
and great arts and music, and we have
It's
all
the
of
land
the
of pleasant living.
combinations. We do. We have all of that.
We are sitting with State Senator Mary Washington. As I said, she wants a job change. She wants to be your mayor. We've had Senate President Bill Ferguson. We've had Speaker Adrian Jones. We've had Delegate Maggie McIntosh.
Great
I know
people.
a close friend of yours. All great people. And now we have you singing the praises of Kerwin. Nestor and I have been on the Kerwin train from the beginning. Here's what
because
the
Hornbeck
governor
taught us right.
Here's what David Hornbeck taught us right.
I know David.
Here's
He's
what,
good
here's
man.
what the governor would say. You all talk a good game. Everybody's for education. Even in the proposal he would say that you all put forward last week, you still don't talk about how you're going to pay for it. So what do you say? Assuming that the governor and his team are secretly listening to us now, what do you say when he says, you don't tell us how you're going to pay for it?
Well, we've got to pay for it. I mean, and we're figuring that out. And I know that we will have a plan that at least for the first 4 years of the funding is figured out. We have to look at revenue that we could generate from other sources. There's a number of ideas about that. We also have
Where's
to look at,
marijuana?
frankly,
That's what so many states have looked toward, right?
yeah. That's on the
When gambling
legal-
hasn't worked.
Right.
The next thing.
Well, yeah. So we have so that is absolutely on the table. There's a number of things on the table, but we also, frankly, have to look at where tax credits. There's some places where there are industries that are already well established, and we're still subsidizing them. We really have to look at the full picture.
Let me ask you about Johns Hopkins, because through this educational experience, and my wife has survived twice at Hopkins. They've saved her life twice. I've been kind of blown away, not just Hopkins, but how many businesses reside on land and don't do what you and I do,
pay
which is
taxes, right? Yes. So I absolutely, that has to be looked at. And so as mayor, I would talk to all of our nonprofits that are not currently contributing as much as you and I are, to say, hey, we've got this bill. What can you do to pitch in? You've got a $156 million tax bill, and you're just paying, a small proportion of that. Could during this period while we're implementing Kerwin, and you certainly have an investment in making sure that we have an educated workforce, you use the roads, you use the police force, you use all the utilities, and yet you don't
We're
pay.
all socialists.
And so, it's about paying their fair share. I don't know, what could be more?
The electricity and the lights are working out on
but
the
that's
street,
how it is.
right?
But that's what it's got. I mean, that's what you rely on shared infrastructure to do. And so if everybody that benefits from the shared infrastructure, if some portion of that is not, like I had an uncle, he would show up, right? My father's got 6 kids. We'd have a big family dinner. We'd go out to a restaurant someplace. My uncle would show up. He'd bring a couple people. You turn around to pay the bill. He'd leave.
Gone, right?
He's gone. I loved my uncle, but he would do that every freaking time. Now he's a family.
We all know someone like that.
But one time, my dad did say, "Hey, look, I really need you to start." And it was kind of embarrassing at first.
Sure,
and then my uncle was just like, "All right," but he was basically waiting for somebody to call him out.
Right.
Well, here comes the $10 bill.
Well,
you pay 4, I'll pay 2.
Yeah. So I don't think it's unreasonable. It's not about violating the contract.
Sure.
It's not. It's really about, hey, when we made this deal under the former 3 administrations ago, this is where we were. We're not there today. Your peers in other institutions, your peers in other states and other cities are paying a little higher rate, than you are. You need to kick in, and I think I actually think that people will step up. That would be my expectation.
Well, before we jump to the election, and again, a couple of questions before we let you run to your next. And one thing, when you're running for mayor and being a state legislator, there's 24 hours isn't enough, right?
She's going to be late for the next.
Yeah, I know, it's not quite enough. Well, we'll do this quickly. Can't talk about crime and all these issues that you've alluded to and building communities without talking about opioids.
Yes.
Crisis in the nation, crisis in our city. What does Mayor Washington do to address the opioid crisis?
And as I talked about, we need every opportunity where either law enforcement or behavioral health specialists can interact with somebody to have that be an opportunity for recovery. And so remember I talked earlier about having stations throughout the city. Some people talk about it being safe use sites. It's not about promoting drug addiction. It's about providing a place where somebody can get some services so that maybe they can get off the drugs and we could reduce the stigma. And so if folks were able to just walk in to these behavioral health counseling centers without an appointment, they may have hit the bottom, a few hours, but if they have to like make a call and they have to like set an appointment, by the time they get that appointment,
Right.
They would have found another fix. But if it can be advertised that come in, no questions asked, you can get the support you need, then we
Treatment
can really
on
start
demand,
to turn.
right?
Absolutely.
Where's the state
Right.
involvement with that? Because we hear so much,
regulate
not
that.
just people being let out of the system and brought back to the streets, that the state is involved in that. Where is the state in mental health and
Yeah.
addiction? And last I checked, and I keep reminding Larry,
Yeah.
Baltimore is in Maryland.
Yes,
right?
we
Yeah,
are.
We are.
We are. We're Baltimore,
Absolutely.
Maryland.
You remind him. Let him
yes,
know when you see
I
him
am.
today.
We are Baltimore, Maryland. Yes. Maryland. Yeah.
Maryland.
Maryland.
Okay.
There you go.
So sorry,
Not
I had to do
Washington,
that.
but she is.
And it is Mary Washington for
For
Baltimore.com.
.com.
Get the PDF.
But it's interesting because we have to sort of reestablish what is the role of the state, because a lot of these these providers of behavioral health services used to be the state, right? Just almost solely the state. And then with the expansion of treatment on demand, you have other, frankly, for-profit entities coming in and being part of that business. And it's been difficult to reestablish exactly what the role of the state is in regulating the placement of these facilities and their accountability. In fact, that's something I've been working with some of my colleagues on, is that there's really not a lot of rules about the quality of the treatment, about what types of services are provided. I mean, we expanded its delivery, but we really haven't focused on the quality of that delivery.
Well, the
And that's
privatization would
something-
also involve the insurance companies, and that's when we get on a very, very slippery slope
Yes.
to getting
with big
a
pharma,
good
the drug
outcome
right.
versus a profitable outcome.
Well,
Exactly.
we never had a meeting.
Exactly.
We never brought the experts together in Baltimore County to discuss this issue, where the number one item on the agenda every time was, if you want to get serious, treatment on demand.
Yeah.
Treatment on demand. And we talked earlier in an earlier episode. I applaud Baltimore County Executive Oshevsky because he's taking a serious look at some of the zoning laws in Baltimore County, for example, have to be changed. We've got to have more residential facilities in our neighborhoods, closer to our neighborhoods.
And Baltimore is disproportionately bearing the responsibility for providing
Right.
treatment, because our surrounding jurisdictions have, through their zoning laws, have made it so that these operators aren't able to operate, and they are operating in our city, but in much greater numbers than the need is. And so we're providing services for the county. So people are coming in from other counties into Baltimore, and then there are some commercial corridors that are just, treatment facility, and then there's like a liquor store, and then it makes them much more vulnerable to those who would take advantage of their addiction.
Proximity is power, right?
It's not
You know.
fair, and it's not
And
effective.
so we really, I'm happy to hear that they're looking at removing the zoning
No,
barriers.
I really applaud
there.
the exec for doing that.
But we got to get at the quality of the state. We need to figure that out.
I do want to make a connection, and we're going to end in a minute or two. We're going to ask you how you're going to win, because that's what matters. As James Carville likes to say, nothing else matters. You got to win, and then you can become the mayor and make a difference. But you have been, and I think there is a connection to the national scene. You've been very open from the beginning about your sexuality. Delegate McIntosh, the same way. Now we have a mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg, being very open about his, going neck and neck in New Hampshire with Bernie Sanders. I want to know what you've experienced in the community as a result of that openness. And here's where I go with that. I'm always skeptical of what we call common knowledge, or what the national pundits will say, because I hear all the time, particularly in the African American community, African Americans won't support someone of the LGBTQ community. They just won't. And I'm thinking, well, they've supported you. They've supported Delegate McIntosh.
Yes.
I'm not sure that's true. So I wonder if you can, for those listening, we've got members of that community driving in our car. I think they're always empowered by hearing folks who are comfortable in their sexuality. Talk about that
If
issue.
you want to find the most trustworthy politician, it's a politician that's out. A politician who's open and honest about this most personal thing in their lives where they know that there could be bias. You know that you could potentially lose votes. You know that people might have some attitudes about who you are. But you can trust that I'm going to be honest because I'm being honest and open about who I am. And so my work, so I'm judged and evaluated based on the work that I've done. But I also say, again, if you're looking for an elected official that is going to be honest and lead with integrity, then somebody who's being honest about that, you know, about who I am, then I'm your candidate. And it's about talking with people and folks. It's again, my experience has been that way.
But walk us through, and that was I thought really an
Well, she's won anyway.
announcement.
Let's start with that.
Well, I was going
right?
to say
no,
you've won,
no matter what,
but
you've won, right?
Yes, you've won. How have you been received in your community, in the African American community, in the churches, in the community?
Well, you're going to see today.
Yeah.
I released a series of endorsements where quite a number of reverends have endorsed me. It's really about the work that I do. You know, it's
Probably
really
something you might
about
not have
who I
envisioned when
am.
you were a 16-year-old girl in Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, no. Well, actually, I was out when I was.
That a minister
yeah.
in 2020
Well,
would check off on a candidacy of yours politically,
well,
right?
again, I guess what I'm saying is that I've been fortunate. Not everybody has been this fortunate, but I have been fortunate in my life, in my career, that I'm definitely aware that maybe I've been discriminated against, or the opportunities have not been as great as if I were not out. But I also have found that people genuinely appreciate the honesty. They genuinely appreciate the work, and the fact that I've helped people not lose their homes for tax sales. That it didn't matter to me whether it was a church or a senior citizen or whether it was a mosque. That I treat everybody fairly and equally under the law. And that has been my personal experience, and I've been fortunate with that, and I continue to lead and trust with that.
So that really is, and I thank you for sharing that, because what I would say to folks then is beware of national stereotypes when folks tell you African American voters will or African American voters won't.
Right.
Because when you cut to the chase, perhaps African American voters are just like every other voter.
Yeah, and
smart
just
enough to sort
or
it out.
Catholics.
Or
you know,
Catholics
they'd say, you know, they do the similar polls. If you poll Catholics, they may not support abortion for themselves, but if you ask a different question, well, would you say that someone else shouldn't have that right? You know, increasingly, people are saying, well, that's their life. They have a decision that they can make. And it's changing over time. And I think more people are focused, these wedge issues that have divided us. And frankly, I'm not naive. They continue to divide us, and people may try to use this. But I think increasingly, the voters are really aware that, hey, I want somebody who shows up every day. I want somebody that has a track record of getting jobs for young people. I want somebody that I can trust. I want somebody that has a vision for my city. And I don't care, you know, who they go to home at night.
Okay, let's get to it.
How do you
Couple
win?
minutes left. How do you win? I'm sitting out there. I'm in my car right now. I'm saying, man, State Senator Mary Washington from the 43rd District. Mary Washington for Baltimore.com. She sounds pretty darn good. How do you win this thing?
With your help.
Well, you talk to her. You got a couple minutes
your
before
vote,
you go talk to her.
Go to MaryWashingtonForBaltimore.com and knock on doors with us, have a house party with us, help us raise money, help us excite people about that there
House
can
party.
be change.
I want to run for mayor if we're going to have a house party. That sounds like fun.
Yes.
How do you feel at this point?
We feel really good, and thank you. I
This
really
is
enjoyed
kind of
this
an open
opportunity.
race, right? This is I think for everybody, as we get closer to it, yourself, all of the candidates, and you're the 5th, 6th, 7th. We've had a lot of the candidates on that, you know, people are talking, and I think there's going to be palpable buzz leading up to
people
this
are
through
looking,
the spring, right?
and they're looking for something different. They're looking for change. We're the Change Campaign. Again, we're not connected to any of the current dysfunction, past or present. Or recent, if folks want to, we know we can't have another set or anyone that's tied to any kind of corruption or dysfunction in our city. We really can't afford that. But more importantly, I'm not just talking about what I'm not, but but I'm offering a vision, I'm offering experience, integrity, a commitment and belief in our city that our best assets are the people of Baltimore, and I truly believe that. And to have a mayor that is unapologetically believes in its people and our future is something we haven't had for a very long time, and I want to offer that. And if you believe in that, join me, MaryWashingtonForBaltimore.com, and click, and we can do this together.
What a terrific discussion. Senator, thank you. I hope you will come back.
I will. I will.
Man, she's talking so much she didn't get to finish her espresso here at State Fair. Appreciate Senator Mary Washington, mayoral candidate. The election is April 28th, but the 16th is when the early election stuff begins. Appreciate everybody out there with Baltimore Positive.
Democracy is not
a spectator sport. You get involved. That's what I'm doing. That's why we're here. Find me at WNST.net and at Baltimore Positive. We're going to continue on with more mayor conversations and conversations about making Baltimore better. We're at State Fair. We're at Baltimore Positive at WNST.net, AM 1570, and Baltimore AM